What's up everyone? Welcome back to Film Focused. Over the past year, I've had a handful of friends who just recently got into photography and came to me with a lot of questions ranging from what camera and lens to buy, to editing software and computer equipment. And a common question that was asked was, what's the difference between an SLR and a rangefinder? So today we have the Pentax 672 and my Mamiya 7 II, and we're going to look at the differences between these two systems. They're both medium format cameras that shoot 6x7 film, and generally speaking, I think they're a good example of showing the differences between SLRs and rangefinders. So we're going to look at how the cameras work and give you guys a better understanding of which camera you might want to buy if you're looking for your first body or maybe your second or third, or you already shoot with one type of system and you're interested in trying out the other. Generally speaking, SLRs tend to be larger and louder than their rangefinder counterpart and lend themselves to portrait and landscape photography. Rangefinders tend to be lighter and a little bit quieter and lend themselves to travel and street photography, situations where you need to work light and fast and don't really want to draw a lot of attention to yourself. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use a rangefinder to shoot landscapes or a SLR to shoot street photography. Those are just general guidelines for what the cameras are best suited for. So let's take a look at these cameras and see how they differ from one another. SLR stands for single lens reflex. Basically what that means is when you're looking through the viewfinder of the camera, you're looking directly through the lens. This is great for portrait and landscape photography because you see exactly what the camera sees. It allows you to be precise with your focus and your composition. However, you're limited to being able to see what the camera can see. If that doesn't make too much sense, it will when we take a look at the rangefinder. Now, when you're focusing with these cameras, you use what's called a focusing screen. They're housed just below the viewfinder of the camera, and the most common is a split level focusing screen. It has a small circle in the very center of the frame with a line running through it. As you're focusing the lens, you'll see two independent pieces of the image moving on top of one another. When those two pieces perfectly align, you know that your subject is in focus. Now, you're not always focusing through the very center of the frame. So with an SLR, you're able to actually use your eye and the outer edges of the viewfinder to properly focus your image. This is great because it adds versatility to these camera systems, especially for portrait photographers. However, when you're trusting your eye and not the camera, you run the risk of missing focus, especially at very shallow apertures. Now, it's a small risk you run for the added versatility of these systems, but you do get better at it as you shoot more and more. It's happened to me before in the past, and I'm sure it's going to happen to me in the future, but I don't think I'll ever stop shooting with an SLR. Now, in order for these viewfinders to work, there's a mirror that has to be housed inside the body of the camera. These mirrors then have to get moved out of the way in order to expose the film in the back. This makes these cameras typically louder than the rangefinder counterparts, and it also sends more vibrations through the camera system. Those vibrations can be mitigated by using a tripod or the mirror lockup function that's available on most SLRs. The mirror lockup function will independently move the mirror out of the way, and then you can afterwards release the shutter. That's really great for landscape work or long exposures because then you're not getting as much vibrations running through the camera. So I'm going to release the shutter now, and you can see just how loud this camera is. The Pentax 6.7, it's notoriously loud, but I think it serves as a great example of hearing what an SLR sounds like, especially when you compare it to the Mamiya 7 in just a minute. You'll see just how different these two cameras sound when you're shooting. Inside, you can see that big mirror that's housed inside the camera body that allows the viewfinder to work. These cameras typically use what's called a focal plane shutter as well, and basically what that means is there's a sheet of metal or fabric that comes horizontally or vertically to cover the film that will then expose it when you release the shutter. Now let's take a look at the rangefinder and see how these cameras differ. Okay, so here's the Mamiya 7 II, a medium format rangefinder. We just finished talking about the focal plane shutter of the Pentax, and there are some rangefinders that do use a focal plane shutter. However, this camera uses a leaf shutter system that's housed in the lens of the camera, not the camera body. That's very common, but even if this camera did use a focal plane shutter, there would still be no need for the mirror like an SLR. That's because the viewfinder of these cameras are located on the body and are completely independent of the camera's lens. So let's go ahead and take a listen to the shutter so we can hear the difference between the two. I'll do that one more time. So this camera is notoriously quiet, just like the Pentax is known for being extremely loud, but I think it serves as a good example, listening to the two different types of cameras. The rangefinders will be much more quiet and send a lot less vibration through the camera because there's less stuff happening inside of it. Looking through the viewfinder of one of these cameras is very similar to creating frame lines out of your fingers in front of your face. You can see what's inside the frame lines, but you can also see outside of them. So when you're looking through the viewfinder, you can see different subjects and objects moving in and out of the frame while the camera is in front of your face. Unlike the SLR, where you're limited to seeing what the lens can see at all times. This is a huge benefit for street and travel photographers, and the main reason why these cameras were so popular to the famous street photographers of the 1900s. On top of the versatility of the viewfinder, you have a very quiet and lightweight system, making it easy to stay incognito in highly populated areas or in a quiet space. Focusing with the rangefinder is very similar to focusing with an SLR. Even though the mechanics of how the system actually works are different, the end result is the same. As you're focusing the lens, you'll see two pieces of the image overlaying on top of one another. When they're perfectly aligned, you know that you're focused just right. Because you're not looking through the camera's lens like the SLR, you are limited to using the small focus tab in the center of the viewfinder. However, most people agree that it's easier and quicker to focus with a rangefinder than an SLR. Alright, I hope that gave you guys a basic understanding of the differences between SLRs and rangefinders. Just a quick recap, the SLR cameras, they tend to do well for portrait and landscape photographers. However, they tend to be louder and heavier than the rangefinders due to the mirror that's housed inside of the camera body. You are also able to focus straight through the lens, and you get to see exactly what the camera sees, so you have the reassurance of knowing what's going to end up on your negatives. The rangefinders are great for travel and street photography because of their light weight and minimal sound. However, you do not have the same amount of control with the viewfinder because it's an independent piece on the body that does not work straight through the lens. I hope this video really helps you guys out. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. If there's anything else that I might have missed, or if you wanted to share your opinion on the similarities and differences between these cameras, please leave that in the comment section below as well. With all that being said, thank you guys so much for stopping by. I really appreciate your time. I hope this video helps. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share the video while you're at it. I hope you guys have a great rest of the day, and I will see you next time.